Lagos, Nigeria, was alive with the hum of street vendors, the scent of roasted plantain in the air, and the rhythmic beats of Afrobeats echoing in the distance. The city pulsed with life, a world of color, movement, and energy. A place where the sun burned golden against the red earth, where the people spoke in booming voices, and laughter carried on the wind like music. It was a world that should have felt like home. But for Adana Okafor, home had always been complicated. She was born in New York City to Nigerian parents, the only child of Chief Obinna Okafor, a self-made business mogul, and Lady Nena Okafor, a woman of grace, deeply rooted in tradition. From the moment she could talk, Adana had learned that she straddled two realities, one foot in the land of her birth, the other in the land of her ancestors. Growing up in America, Adana had always felt different. Her skin was darker than most of her classmates. Her tightly coiled hair did not cascade down her back like the other girls. Even when her mother pressed it straight, it never seemed to behave the way she wanted it to. She was the girl whose name teachers always stumbled over, the girl who was asked, "Where are you really from?" as if New York was never enough of an answer. She had tried to blend in. She had straightened her hair, softened her accent, even forced herself to like peanut butter sandwiches instead of the flavorful jollof rice her mother packed for lunch. But no matter how much she tried, she was always the African girl. Then, at 12 years old, her world shifted again. Her father, having amassed a fortune in oil and real estate, decided it was time to return home to Nigeria. It was a decision made with the certainty of a man who believed he knew best. "America has taught you enough," he had said. "Now, it is time for you to know where you truly come from." Adana wasn't given a choice. Growing up in Lagos, Nigeria was supposed to be home, but when they arrived in Lagos, Adana realized she was just as much an outsider there as she had been in America. She spoke Igbo, but not fluently enough. Her accent, infused with years of American influence, stood out. Her classmates at her elite Lagos school called her Americana, sometimes with admiration, sometimes with jealousy, but always in a way that made her feel different. She had expected to fit in, to finally be among people who looked like her, to finally belong. But here, she was too American, too direct, too opinionated, too unwilling to bend to expectations. Her mother encouraged her to embrace her roots, to attend social gatherings, to prepare for the life expected of her, the life of a wealthy Igbo woman, one who would marry well and bring pride to the family name. But Adana had other plans. When she was 15, she realized that education was the one thing no one could take from her. She had always been intelligent, but in Lagos, she learned to excel. She studied relentlessly, determined to make her own way in a society that often told women their worth was in their beauty and the families they married into. She became the top student in her class, not because she wanted praise, but because she knew it was the only way to control her own destiny. Her father wanted her to study business so she could take over part of his empire. Her mother encouraged her to study something prestigious like law, a field where she could make connections with Nigeria's elite. But Adana had known since she was a child that she wanted to be a doctor. Maybe it was because of the time she had spent in hospitals, watching doctors move with purpose and precision. Maybe it was because she had always been drawn to healing, to mending what was broken. She applied to medical school at the University of Lagos, one of Nigeria's most competitive institutions. She had barely turned 17 when she received her acceptance letter. Her father was unimpressed. "A doctor? Why?" he asked one evening, reclining in his grand study. "You don't need to work so hard, Adana. Marry a good man, and you will have a life of comfort." Adana had clenched her fists under the table. "What if I don't want a life of comfort? What if I want a life of purpose?" Her father sighed, as if tired of this argument. "You are a beautiful girl, Adana. A woman like you should not waste her youth in hospitals, working like a commoner." Then maybe beauty is not the most important thing about me. Her words had hung in the air, sharp and unyielding. The university years. Medical school was the hardest thing she had ever done. Her first year at the University of Lagos was brutal. The workload was crushing, the expectations suffocating. The long nights spent poring over textbooks, the early morning lectures, the practical exams that made her doubt herself, it was overwhelming. She was one of the youngest in her class, one of the few women, and one of the only students from extreme wealth. At first, some of her classmates dismissed her. "What's a rich girl doing here?" one student had muttered. "She doesn't need this." She ignored them. She had spent too much of her life being underestimated. Instead, she worked harder than anyone else. She asked questions, stayed late in the library, and studied with a relentlessness that shocked even her professors. Slowly, the respect came. By the time she entered her third year, she was no longer just the rich girl or the Americaner. She was Adana Okafor, top of her class, the girl who refused to be outworked. And in the process, something changed within her. She became confident. She no longer cared if she was different. She no longer apologized for her accent, for her background, for the way she carried herself. She had earned her place, and she refused to let anyone take it from her. She had learned that power was not just in money or status, but in knowledge. That real beauty was in self-assurance. That belonging was not about where she came from, but about who she chose to be. By the time she graduated at the top of her class, she had become a woman who walked into a room with confidence, who knew her worth, who refused to let anyone else define her. A heart untouched. Many powerful men sought her hand: politicians, oil magnates, foreign investors. They arrived in their sleek cars, bearing extravagant gifts, offering a life of privilege and ease. But none of them moved her heart. Not the transactional love of power and wealth, not the kind that came with expectations and duty. She wanted the kind of love that set souls on fire, the kind that made a person better, not just richer. And soon, fate would prove her right.
A man who wouldn't give up thousands of miles away, in London, James Whitmore was living a very different life. Born into British aristocracy, he had everything: wealth, charm, and status. But James was different. Unlike his father, Lord Richard Whitmore, who cared only for legacy, James craved adventure. He wasn't interested in corporate boardrooms or inherited wealth. He wanted to see the world, to feel it, to live it. One evening, while scrolling through travel blogs, he stumbled upon images of Nigeria, the breathtaking waterfalls, the bustling streets, the rich culture. A strange pull gripped his heart. "Nigeria. That's where I'm going next," he announced. His best friends, Daniel and Chris, exchanged looks. "Nigeria. Mate, that's not your usual destination," Daniel said. James only grinned. "Exactly. That's why I have to go." James had seen many beautiful women in his lifetime, but none like Adana. The moment he met her in the restaurant, his world tilted. She wasn't just breathtaking, she was intelligent, graceful, and had a quiet fire burning beneath her composed exterior. But the most intriguing part: she wasn't interested in him. That was new. Back in London, women chased James. They flirted, giggled at his jokes, and hummed on his every word. But Adana? He challenged him. The night after they met, James sat on the balcony of his hotel suite, staring out at the twinkling lights of Lagos. "This woman," he murmured to himself, swirling a glass of whiskey. "She's special." His best friends, Daniel and Chris, weren't convinced. "Mate, maybe she's just not into you," Chris said, lounging on the couch. "Or maybe she's testing me," James countered with a smirk. Daniel chuckled. James Whitmore, the ladies' man, finally facing rejection. James laughed. Not rejection. Just a challenge. He was determined to win her heart. And so, the pursuit began. Scene 2, the grand gestures begin. James pulled out all the stops. Flowers * every morning, a bouquet of white lilies, her favorite, arrived at her doorstep. Each bouquet came with a handwritten note, sometimes a simple "thinking of you" or a line of poetry. Gift * a gold bracelet with her initials engraved. A book of poetry by Pablo Neruda. A painting of Lagos at sunset, knowing how much she loved watching the sky change colors. Dinner invitations * he booked reservations at Lagos' finest restaurants, waiting patiently outside her hospital after her shift, only for her to shake her head and say, "I appreciate the effort, James. But I'm not interested." A vacation offer * a weekend getaway to Dubai. First class tickets. A luxury suite overlooking the Persian Gulf. Just two friends taking a trip, he had said with a teasing grin. She had laughed, shaking her head. "I don't go on vacations with men I barely know." James was beginning to think he'd never break through her walls. Scene 3, the poetry that broke her. One evening, after yet another rejection, James did something different. He showed up at her doorstep, not with flowers, not with jewelry, but with a worn leather book in his hands. Adana opened the door, her eyes narrowing. "James, what are you doing here?" "Reading to you," he said simply. She sighed, leaning against the doorway. "James. Just listen," he pleaded. 5 minutes. If you're not moved, I'll leave and never bother you again." She hesitated, then nodded, arms crossed. James opened the book, his voice soft, steady, yet full of emotion. "In a world of fleeting beauty, you remain constant. A melody that lingers in the air long after the song fades. Your laughter is the rhythm my heart beats to. * and your soul, a light that even the stars envy." * Adana's breath hitched. She swallowed hard, but a single tear slipped down her cheek. James saw it, his heart aching. He closed the book and whispered, "Tell me you feel nothing, and I'll walk away." Silence. Then, she whispered back, "I don't want you to walk away." And that was the moment everything changed. Scene 4, a new beginning. The next morning, James woke up to a single text message. Adana * dinner. Tomorrow night. 8 p.m. No poetry required *. His heart pounded. Yes. He shouted, startling Chris and Daniel, who were eating breakfast. "What?" Chris raised an eyebrow. James grinned, tossing his phone onto the table. "I got a date." Daniel whistled. Well. I guess persistence pays off." James smiled to himself. "No, mate. Love does." And as he looked out at the Lagos skyline, he knew, ***, this was just the beginning of something extraordinary, ***. Scene 5, the first date that changed everything. James wanted to make their first date unforgettable. He didn't want just another fancy dinner. He wanted magic. So, he rented out an entire restaurant. A private chef curated a 5-course meal, carefully selecting dishes that fused British and Nigerian flavors, a symbol of their two worlds coming together. Candles flickered in the dimly lit room. Soft jazz played in the background. The scent of fresh roses filled the air. James adjusted his tailored black suit, waiting anxiously. And then Adana walked in. She was wearing a deep red gown, the silk hugging her curves, her natural curls cascading down her shoulders. James forgot how to breathe. "You look divine." She smiled, a soft blush warming her cheeks. "You're not too bad yourself." They sat across from each other, the candlelight casting a golden glow on her skin. Why go through all this trouble? She asked, swallowing her wine. James leaned forward. Because you're worth it. She studied him carefully. And what if I change my mind about you? He smacked. Then I'll have to win you all over again. And just like that, she laughed, a real, genuine laugh. James knew, in that moment, that he was falling hard. Scene 6, the long drive and the first kiss. After dinner, James suggested a late-night drive. The streets of Lagos were quieter now, the warm night air carrying the scent of the ocean. Adana rolled down the window, letting the wind play with her curls. James glanced at her. What are you thinking? She smiled softly. That I might have been wrong about you. His heart skipped a beat. As they pulled up to her home, James walked her to her doorstep. They stood there, in comfortable silence, gazing at each other. Then, slowly, James leaned in. Adana didn't pull away. Their lips met in a soft, lingering kiss, filled with unspoken promises. When they finally pulled apart, James whispered, "Good night, my queen." Adana smiled, whispering back, "Good night, James." And as she stepped inside, she knew she was falling for him. But love was never that simple. And their greatest challenges were yet to come.
Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Adana and James had become inseparable. They spent their weekends exploring Lagos, visiting the National Museum, taking boat rides to Takwe Bay, and trying street food together. James was utterly in love. One evening, after a charity event at Adana's hospital, he looked at her and whispered, "I want to spend my life with you." Adana smiled. "James, don't say things you don't mean." He cupped her face gently. "I've never meant anything more. But love, no matter how strong, is never without its obstacles." James was an outsider in her world, and though Adana had accepted him, others had not. At a high society wedding, where the elite of Lagos gathered in opulence, whispers followed them. She could have any rich Nigerian man, why him? A white man. What would their children even be? Adana heard it all. James noticed her tension. That night, as they drove home, he finally said, "Tell me what's wrong." She hesitated, then sighed. "You don't belong here, James. And people will never let me forget it." James gripped the steering wheel. "I love you, Adana. I don't care what they think." She looked out the window, her heart conflicted. Because deep down, she knew her family would never accept him. The moment her father found out about James, the entire Okafor family estate went into chaos. That evening, Adana was summoned. Her father sat at the head of the table, his face stern. Her mother, usually gentle, had worry in her eyes. Adana, her father's voice was calm but firm. "Tell me it's a lie." She took a deep breath. "It's not a lie, Baba. I love him." His expression hardened. "Then you bring shame to this family." Her mother sighed. "Adana, think about your children. Where will they belong? They will belong where love exists." Her father slammed his fist on the table. "Do not speak of love when you are betraying your people." Tears burned her eyes. "Baba, I love you, but this is my life." He stood up, his voice final. "Then if you marry him, you are no longer my daughter." A painful silence filled the room. Adana's world shattered. James was waiting outside her home when she arrived, her face pale and her eyes red from crying. "Adana, what happened?" She swallowed hard. "They won't accept us." James exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. "Then we'll wait. We'll show them that love is stronger than traditions." But the weight of rejection bore down on her. Days turned into arguments. "James, you don't understand what it's like." "Then help me understand, Adana." The stress grew, and the love they built started to crumble. One night, James finally said it. "Maybe we need time apart." Adana's breath caught. "You're leaving?" His blue eyes were filled with pain. "I feel like I'm losing you anyway." The next morning, he was gone. Adana stood at the airport terminal, watching his plane disappear into the sky, and with it, her heart. James returned to London, but it didn't feel like home anymore. He went back to his family's estate, where his father, Lord Whitmore, greeted him with a knowing look. "I told you, son. That word is not meant for you." James didn't respond. Because his word was no longer whole. Meanwhile, Adana buried herself in work, but everywhere she turned, she saw him. His laughter. His blue eyes. The way he called her "my queen" in his terrible Nigerian accent. Her best friend, Ijeoma, had had enough. "Adana, stop being so proud. If you love him, fight for him." Adana hesitated. "What if he's moved on?" Ijeoma smirked. "Then you'll know. But if he hasn't, you'll win back the love of your life." Adana took a deep breath. She had always fought for what she wanted. And she wanted James. That night, she booked a flight to London. James was in his London office, staring at the skyline, lost in thought. Then, he heard his secretary's voice over the intercom. "Sir, there's a woman here to see you." James sighed. "Tell her I'm busy. She says her name is Adana." His entire body froze. He rushed out of his office, and there she was. Standing in the middle of the lobby, her eyes brimming with emotion. He took slow steps toward her, his heart racing. "Adana." His voice was barely a whisper. She exhaled shakily. "I love you, James. And I'm here to fight for us." Silence stretched between them. Then, he crossed the distance in seconds, pulling her into his arms. His lips met hers in a deep, desperate kiss, as if making up for all the lost time. When they finally pulled apart, James whispered, "Marry me." This time, she didn't hesitate. "Yes." And in that moment, James knew nothing would ever keep them apart again. Scene 7, the final battle. Returning to Nigeria was not easy. Her father refused to speak to her. James visited the Okafor home every day, kneeling in front of Chief Obinna in the traditional Igbo way, showing his respect. He learned Igbo culture, joined family meetings, and never gave up. Months passed. Then, one evening, Chief Obinna finally spoke. "You love my daughter?" James knelt down again. "With everything I have." A long silence. Then, the old man sighed. "Then who am I to stand in the way?" Adana burst into tears. Her father took James' hands. "Welcome to the family, my son." Scene 8, a love that conquered all. Their wedding was a spectacle of love. A grand Igbo traditional wedding, where James wore an agbada, danced for the elders, and paid the bride price. A lavish white wedding in London, where Adana walked down the aisle toward the man who had fought for her heart. Both families, once divided, became one. As they danced under the stars that night, James whispered, "It was worth it." Adana smiled, pressing her forehead to his. Every moment. And as their love story continued, they became a testament that true love knows no borders, only two hearts willing to fight for each other.